To understand the significance of this car, we'll start with the name.
Because apparently the 3 represents this as being the 3rd major Volkswagen launch of all time, after the Beetle and the Golf. But what makes it so important?
Well, this is Volkswagen's first full production car based on a bespoke electric car platform. Yes, we had the electric e-Golf before, but that was essentially just a Golf with a battery stuffed inside it. This, from the ground up, is a pure electric car.
And obviously VW is targeting mainstream success with this car. It wants lots of people to like and lots of people to buy it. But that isn't such a given these days because, of course, electric cars aren't as rare as they used to be. So this is up against everything from the Renault Zoe to the Tesla Model 3. And because it wants that really wide appeal to a big audience, perhaps that's partly why, from a design and style perspective, they haven't wildly abandoned the look and the feel of a traditional hatchback. So it's roughly the same footprint as a Golf, but the big difference being that with no engine at the front of the car, it means it's got this kind of stubbier looking, shorter front end to it. And it generally has quite a futuristic look to it, but without being shockingly different. Inside the car, there is a futuristic, minimalist feel, and it feels really open and spacious as well. So this center console is really low, and it just feels like there's lots of space here. Now, every ID.3 gets this kind of digital driver pod here, and next to it you've got a kind of rotary dial gear selector, which is similar to what you get in a BMW i3. Now, the good thing about this driver display is that it's connected to the actual steering column. So that means when you want to adjust the wheel, the driver display moves with it. So no matter where you want to sit or where you want to have the wheel, you've got a pretty good chance of being able to see everything here really clearly without having the top of the wheel kind of awkwardly cutting off some of the dials like it does in some other cars. And there's loads of adjustment in the wheel, loads of adjustment in these seats as well, which are really comfortable. The only thing they're lacking is a little bit of side support when cornering, but still really good. But in this quest for a minimalist look, VW's basically got rid of all buttons. So here we are again with these slightly awkward slider climate control buttons and another sliding dial for the volume. And on the steering wheel controls as well, they're kind of an odd mix of all being molded out of one bit of plastic. And you do move them to press, but you've also got a bit of haptic feedback as well. And it all just feels quite awkward, and you're not always 100% sure if what you've pressed is what you meant to have pressed or if it has actually pressed it. And for the windows as well, operating the front windows, nice and simple as you'd expect. But then if you want to open or close the rear windows, you've got to press this rear, you've got to press the actual word rear here, but then it's not always immediately obvious when you've pressed it, and then it's difficult to then turn back to the front. So this isn't us complaining about new developments in technology, but it just seems that all of this feels like a backward step for usability.
This 10-inch touchscreen comes as standard on every ID.3, but the software is nowhere near as slick as rivals, especially the Model 3. It's trying to be slick with these fancy pictures, but it's style over substance because it's laggy and really confusingly laid out. Plenty of other systems like the Model 3 and even the Kia e-Niro are much better.
And what's happened to Volkswagen's quality interiors? Because before, every new car they released used to be really, really good inside. But now, the new Golf, that's been downgraded, and the ID.3 has followed suit as well. So it's only really this strip of plastic on the dashboard that has a feel of quality and luxury to it. But everything else is really hard, scratchy plastics, cheap feeling everywhere really. And when you're at the lower end of the ID.3 price range, that isn't such a problem because compared to something like a Nissan Leaf, it's much nicer in here. But at the higher end of the ID.3 price range, when you're comparing it to something like a Model 3, which admittedly isn't the best for build quality, that is where the ID.3 does feel below par in that respect. So if you're coming from a BMW i3 into a VW ID.3, then you are going to feel disappointed. But one big advantage that the ID.3 has is the amount of space on offer inside, because building this on a bespoke electric car platform where you haven't got to factor in where you're going to fit a massive engine, it means that while this has basically got the same footprint as the Golf, it is more spacious inside. And where you really notice that extra space is in the legroom, both in the front and especially in the rear, because compared to a Golf, you have definitely got more room to stretch out in. Now, headroom is a bit on the tight side, but it's still pretty good for people who are just under 6 foot, as I am, and really you'd have to go for something like a Tesla Model 3 to find something within this price bracket that's more accommodating. The Model 3's boot is much bigger as well, but the ID.3 should match the e-Niro for luggage space.
Now let's explain the makeup of the ID.3 range. There are 3 battery sizes to choose, which provide varying performance and battery ranges to suit your needs. Currently, there's the first edition, which has a 58 kilowatt-hour battery, a 201 brake horsepower motor, and a range of 261 miles. But there will also be a cheaper 48 kilowatt-hour battery with a 148 brake horsepower motor and 205 mile range. There's also a lower powered 148 brake horsepower version of the 58 kilowatt battery and a top spec 77 kilowatt hour battery. That comes only with the 201 brake horsepower motor and will do up to 342 miles.
So most versions of the ID.3 will travel further than the Nissan Leaf and are more than equal to the Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus, which is impressive. We are in the first edition model, which gets the 58 kilowatt hour battery, and it does feel pretty quick. So 0 to 62 miles per hour is done in just 7.3 seconds, which is quicker than the Leaf, if not enough to bother the Tesla Model 3. But really, you probably aren't buying this car for its acceleration ability. You are buying it for how good it is for short journeys around town. Let's be honest, that's why you're going to be getting it. So here we are in an urban environment. And really, this is where the ID.3 is absolutely in its element, because there are a number of reasons why. The first being that it's very smooth to drive. So with lots of electric cars, the brake pedal isn't very good. So it's either really grabby and sensitive, or it's really numb and difficult to judge what inputs you have to put in. But in the ID.3, it's really well judged. And so it means coming to a stop is very good, as is the regenerative braking, which when you put the gear selector into B mode means that when you lift off the accelerator, the car will slow itself down. Now, it doesn't offer one pedal driving, which is a shame, because we've seen in cars like the Nissan Leaf and in the Tesla Model 3 that one pedal driving is brilliant around town. That's where when you lift off the accelerator, the car brings itself to a complete stop. Now, the ID.3 can't do that. It will just slow itself down to a very slow speed, but it won't actually stop the car completely. But still, it's smooth. It's also really quiet. You've got no rumbly engine under the bonnet giving you a headache. And the electric motors are pretty hushed as well. Road roar is basically non-existent at these town speeds, obviously. It's got a really tight turning circle, so it's 10.2 meters, which is about the same as a Volkswagen Up, a tiny city car.
Beyond the urban sprawl, the steering is accurate and reasonably weighted in the default comfort driving mode. But hit sport mode and you get a bit of useful extra heft with it. Grip is decent, and for an everyday hatchback designed to get you from A to B with little drama, the ID.3 handles just fine, with more driver engagement than you'll get in a Renault Zoe. But for keen drivers excited by the prospect of this being rear-wheel drive, it will twitch at the rear if you back off the accelerator abruptly mid-corner, but that's about all you'll notice there. A lighter, regular hatchback like the new Seat Leon, for example, is still a far more thrilling experience behind the wheel.
But perhaps the main criticism of the car on the road is the ride, because it's a heavy car with a big, heavy battery. So to kind of cope with that, you've got quite a stiff suspension setup. And it's not that it's harsh or uncomfortable or really abrupt, but it's just more so at lower speeds. When you're going over potholes and really nasty broken bits of road, then the ride can get quite choppy. So the question is, should the ID.3 be your electric car? Well, for £28,000, if you include the UK government grant, then you can imagine that it's got the ability to take sales away from the Renault Zoe and the Nissan Leaf. But the higher spec models of this car that get closer to the Tesla Model 3, that's where it's going to be a bit more of a struggle for it. So whether this really does go down in history as one of the 3 greatest Volkswagens of all time remains open for debate. But for now, it's certainly one of the better electric family cars that you can buy. For a great deal on your next new car, go to whatcar.com. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like. Any thoughts about the car, leave a comment below. And make sure you're subscribed to our channel because we've got loads of new car reviews on electric cars, on hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and petrols, everything you can imagine, all coming out on our YouTube channel.